ensure that our customers over $100 million of sales
and exceed expectations.
we look forward to meeting you.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Podcast. I'm Edison Vasquez, I'm part of the industrial team here at Conreal. Thank you for joining us today. This is episode 22 of the Industrial Real Estate Podcast, and today we are discussing how to avoid surprise increases on operating expenses on leases. Again, thanks for following us. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. You can follow the link at warehousestv.com. That is warehousesplural.tv.com. You can also find me online on Twitter at EdisonCRE, on Instagram at Edison Industrial, on Facebook at Edison Industrial, and on LinkedIn under my name, Edison Vasquez, PA. Thanks for joining us. Again, today we are going to discuss how to avoid surprise increases on operating expenses or lease. This applies to tenants who have recently leased a space or have been leasing space for a long time and have recently get increases on their operating expenses. What we're seeing on our market and generally across the country is that tenants are getting sticker shock from higher increase than usual for their operating expenses. As you know, the industrial real estate market has been very strong, and tenants have been getting sticker shocks on increases for operating expenses. This occurs when leases are a triple net, and in this case, on the triple net leases, the landlord passes through the operating expenses through the tenant. These expenses include property taxes, property insurance, and general building maintenance. And these expenses might increase at a higher rate than what was negotiated on the lease. For example, taxes may increase 5-10% depending on municipality. Property insurance may increase depending on the state or the location. Maintenance, if they need an exterior roof, a new parking lot. So those are expenses that might increase at a higher rate. So when that happens, tenants get to pay the bill, and a lot of tenants are not protected at the time of paying the rent, and the landlord passes those expenses to the tenant. So here's some tips that can help tenants avoid that surprise increase at the time of the next year or during the lease term when the landlord sends you the invoice for the operating expenses. Number one is do a gross lease when possible. So at the time of negotiating a lease or renewing a lease agreement, see if you can do a gross lease. In a gross lease, contrary to a triple net lease, the gross lease will push the increases over to the landlord. In this case, the landlord will be responsible for any increases on property taxes, property insurance, and the building maintenance. What you pay is a gross rate, as the name says, for the rent, whether it's $10, $12, all the expenses included. So whenever you're negotiating a lease, consider a gross lease in which the landlord may cover all the expenses, so there's not a big increase at the time of getting the invoice at the beginning of the year from the landlord. Number two, and this is very important at the time of negotiating, and consider asking this with your real estate broker about working with a landlord that will not sell the building. What we see happening in this current market is that developers develop the building, sign a lease with a tenant, and then turn around and sell that building to an investment fund or a large investor that will keep that building. And in that process, that property gets reassessed under the municipality and the property taxes skyrocket. And that bill is passed through to the tenant, which seems unfair for tenants to pay that expense when there's a transaction. So at the moment of looking at spaces, consider looking for landlords that plan to hold the property long term. Additionally, you can ask if the landlord has any plans of selling the building, because if they do, this might affect you as a tenant at the moment of signing a lease or the moment of paying your rent. So work with your industrial real estate broker who can guide you to the best landlords that will hold the property long term and that can give you control on those operating expenses. The next tip is put a cap on controllable expenses. We mentioned that in previous podcasts and during our videos as one of the best tips to control your expenses. In this case, at the moment of doing a triple net lease, consider including a clause that will control the amount of expenses that a landlord can do on the building. Unfortunately, a lot of the leases are one-sided to landlords, and there's no restrictions on the amount of expenses that landlord can do. So a lot of landlords might do improvements that are not necessary that can increase the operating expenses substantially. So at the moment of doing a lease agreement, work with your attorney into including clause to put a cap on the controllable expenses. That way you're protected and the landlord has some restrictions as to what expenses that can be passed through to the tenant. And so at the moment of getting an invoice for the operating expenses, there will be a limit on the increases. So at the moment of negotiating, consider putting a cap on controllable expenses. If all these tips are audible and you want to sign a lease with a landlord that will sell the building and that you will see an increase on the operating expenses, what you can do is look at history of other tenants in that development. For example, if you are looking at a property and a new development and you know that the developer is going to sell that building to an investor and therefore the property taxes will increase and your operating expenses bill will increase over time, consider looking at history, what other tenants are paying in the park, work with a real estate broker who will get the information from other tenants as to what operating expenses are they paying and what was the increase when they got the building that they occupy was sold. So this is a way to at least forecast and have an idea of what those expenses might be once that building is sold to a new owner. Again, once the building is sold to a large investment fund or to an investor, those taxes get reassessed and the operating expenses will increase substantially. So that's one thing that a lot of landlords will not tell you when you are looking at spaces. So hope these tips helps. We try to keep it short and sweet. These are things that are important, and a lot of tenants are not being educated on how to control those expenses. And when looking at the new developments, price might be attractive. However, at the moment of a lease, of the second year of the lease, or when the operating expenses are redone, then the increase in annual expenses can be a sticker shock to a lot of tenants. So consider these items as some way to help you as a tenant to fight and get the expenses under control at the moment of lease. So we do this in all of our podcasts. We try to feature a property. So in this case, we want to feature a property that we have listed here in Miami in a city called Opa-locka. It's a refrigerator warehouse that is 81,000 square feet that we have available for lease. There's a refrigerator facility. You can go into our website, warehousesmarket.com, and go on the properties for lease. You'll see the properties there. And this property can be divided up to a minimum of 25,000 square feet. And property has refrigeration and a portion of freezer space. So this property suits for a lot of users in the refrigerated cold storage facilities that can move produce, flowers, and other different perishables. So this property is available for lease and is available immediately. And you can contact us with any questions. You can also visit our website for more information, videos, on the property. And last but not least on this podcast is the industrial tip. We get good feedback from all of you on the industrial tip, and we try to give you quick tips on industrial real estate. In this case, since we're talking about tenants and leases and either negotiating a new lease or renewing a lease, one industrial tip for tenants is to negotiate with ample time. Time is a good friend, and the more you have it as a tenant, the better. Time gives you control to leverage and negotiate better terms at the time of renewing or at the time of signing a new lease. When looking at renewing a lease, as more time passes by, it becomes more challenging to get better terms from the landlord. Also, when you're looking at new space, if you are pressed for time, the landlord might stick firm on their terms and giving you less leverage to negotiate. So if you're looking to renew your lease or looking to add a new lease, consider giving yourself enough time. It can be at least 12 months. It can be up to 24 months, depending on the improvements needed for the new space. A lot of companies need a lot of improvements into their space, either power or equipment, and to give themselves enough time to do that transition into a new space or to renew the lease with the current landlord. Again, at the moment of renewing the lease or looking for a new space, give yourself enough time that can give you leverage for negotiation. And don't forget to work with your industrial real estate broker, somebody who specializes in the market and somebody who knows the market very, very well, who represent you with the best terms at the time of negotiation. So how this helps, thanks for following us and thanks for watching us. We appreciate all the feedback and all the questions that we get on all of our platforms. We hope this helps all tenants, landlords, and buyers in the market. You can visit our website, warehousesmarket.com, for more information and all the latest listings on industrial real estate. There we have all the property information, a little more about us, what we do. We're fortunate to be part of the industrial team and assist clients in the leasing of sales of industrial space here in South Florida and throughout the country. You can watch us on our YouTube channel at warehousestv.com. There you'll see all the videos that we have posted, including podcasts and including different videos that we make on a weekly basis for all of our followers. Don't forget to follow us on social media. You can visit on LinkedIn under my name, Edison Vasquez PA. Also on Twitter, Edison CRE. On Facebook at Edison Industrial. And on Instagram at Edison Industrial. We appreciate your feedback. Don't forget to hit subscribe on the podcast or on our YouTube channel. We appreciate it. And more importantly, we appreciate all your feedback that you give us on the video and all on our blog. Please keep sending us your questions. Keep sending us your feedback. It helps us a lot and it helps us provide the right information for our clients. This concludes episode 22 and how to avoid surprise increases on operating expenses on leases. Thanks for following us and we'll see you next time. Take care. Be safe.